Hello, welcome along to Sunrise Daily today. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
Well, it's a beautiful Thursday morning. I'm Kayode Okikiolu.
I'm Ayo Makinde. Good morning and welcome from the holiday.
Yeah, I hope people are back to work, really. We need to enforce that.
Which one?
The back to work.
Not the holiday.
You need to enforce.
I mean, because I think for a lot of people, they may have taken it for granted that the holiday may be for the whole week. You know how these things work, so it's back to work.
Well, that kind of thinking will probably be for, I don't see that happening in the private sector, really.
You think it will be for where?
So you didn't complete the statement.
Yeah.
I don't think it will be something you'll find in the private sector, really, full stop.
So where will we find it?
So where do we find it then? In the
I believe I'm also
somebody's throwing stones, huh? Oh, I see.
Shaking tables.
Oh, I see. Well.
No, because really, I mean, it happens occasionally when, even on a Monday, you're trying to, and the next 2 days you're going to have a holiday. You invite some guests and they are unable to make it for certain specific reasons.
Yeah, I mean, people have to do what they have to do, when they can. It's just that having been on holiday went up until Wednesday, and you thought, if Friday's a half day, and I had to come back for Thursday, and then people think, you know what, why don't I, or can I, but things don't work like that.
But really,
shouldn't be that way.
No, I agreed with you completely. A number of people would want, and this is part of all of these things we say about national, sacrifice for national interest and all of those things. A Monday is a work day. A Tuesday, a Wednesday, they are public holidays. A Thursday, a Friday, they are work days. Put in that little day's work because you really never know how far-reaching that will be in the scheme of things in the country. I mean, if there are some decisions that ought to be taken and you are unable to take those decisions simply because you are not at your desk at the day and at the time you are supposed to be there, especially if you're a boss. You are the boss and, you give that kind of leadership, be it public sector or private sector. What are you telling your subordinates? It goes without saying. So when we talk about sacrifice, I mean that's part of the theme of the last 2 days, the holiday, that we had. When we talk about sacrifice, exactly what are we sacrificing here? Is it your money? Is it your time? Is it your brain? Is it whatever it is? So long as you have already committed yourself to a thing, do it.
It's quite good to see that. I mean, some sections of the public service. They've employed some corporate governance strategy to ensure better productivity. And I think this is something we need to harp on time and again because the effectiveness and efficiency of a nation or a state civil service will tell on different strata of that particular state or nation. Talk about economy, security, and the rest, because that's essentially the engine room of government. I don't want to jump the gun today or just yet, because that will form a major part of our conversation, but it will be good to have these conversations around the public sector. Well, we take for granted that the private sector, I mean, it's your money, it's your business, you want to ensure that every penny counts, but in the private sector, civil service, whatever term you want to use for that, I think it's quite important because if we don't get it right there, then you wonder how effective will governance be?
In one of these Francophone West African countries, they have this time which appears to be nationally recognized as during their work days, normal work days, maybe break. In between those work hours where if you have to be on break, everybody's on break at that time. So nothing gets done when they come back. As part of measures to ease themselves into certain scenarios such that, because if you look at figures of even young people who are coming down with high BP, depression, which leads to, all the suicide rates you see here, it doesn't just happen in a day. And you just think, look, what about here? Do we have any such thing? Do we have that corporate culture wherein you imbibe it? And even if you do, can they make it back to work at that time? I know they say if you give them an inch, they take a mile. So, but some say, well, in some Africa, but it happens in some African countries. And they're disciplined about it.
It happens.
So what about here?
It happens in organizations where they are designed to happen like that. I can beat my chest and say there are a number of organizations in Nigeria where those things happen. Not like in some cases, you mentioned the public sector where sometimes they say you sell your vacation. You know, these things, we hear that these things happen all over the place. How true is it? I mean, it's probably, you know, what out there. There's something you mentioned here, and, you know, what you talked about, Chamberlain, is essentially what you call oiling the machinery of personnel. You know, when we look at any work environment, especially governance, my belief is that the civil service, the public service, is the engine of the car of Nigeria. The people that we see, the politicians, the president, they are just like the body or the headlamps and all of those things. And unfortunately, these are the things that you see. But the engine is the one that will make or mar. But guess what? Who is the driver? Who is the mechanic? We are all supposed to be in this thing together. But this vehicle is either moving or stagnant. And it's all on all of us.
So that raises huge questions about
Absolutely.
leadership from wherever you are.
Absolutely.
You don't have to be in front to be the leader. So in whatever space you are,
Absolutely.
you're a leader of sorts.
Yes.
So perhaps we'll see what happens with that as we progress. But right now, we're just going to go right on and take a look at how some of the dailies are reflecting some of what is going on in different parts of the country and the world, I might add. Let's start with The Guardian today. And it's something diplomatic on the front page of The Guardian newspaper. So when you take a look at that, you see how that reflects diplomatic stalemate in Benin over Igboho's detention extradition. So that is the big one for them right there. And look at the riders now, they've got a host of them. Protests rock Ibadan, Cotonou. Lawyer, Yoruba indigenes fought to stop standby helicopter from bringing Igboho to Nigeria. 1984 extradition treaty. Igboho, ill-advised, should have fled through Niger, says Oyebode. Agunloye, agitation will continue until Buhari adopts principles of social justice. Igboho, not a criminal. Are Ona Kakanfo, Okeodumakin, others tell FG. And then you see the light of the riders there. The acts alleged must constitute offense in host's jurisdiction. And this you see what? Urugo. I hope I see that right. Well, there you go. Big lead on the front page there today. And they got images of perhaps some of the key persons there. Right beneath that, Nigeria has lost its soul, Catholic bishops tell Buhari. Corporate president over selective administration of justice, back Kuka on his address to U.S. Congress, say insecurity, dwindling economy, others are indices of a failed country. So that's what you see there, right there on the front page, alongside several others, which you just got to have a look yourself. That's The Guardian today.
Well, for the Nigerian Tribune, the lead is a follow-up to something that played out a few days back. My jet shot at with explosives, flight controls delayed, or rather destroyed. That's coming from the pilot. Says he had premonition of the attack, walked 30 kilometers with one leg, injured. So, I mean, we've not heard the last of that, especially with the questions that have been raised. Page 2 of the Nigerian Tribune at least gives some insight to what he went through. But like I said, a lot of questions still yet to be answered. Hopefully, some clarity will come regarding that one. And you have pictures right there on the front page. And what's under those pictures perhaps gives explanation. Yoruba in Cotonou foiled Igbo's extradition. Lawyer. Supporters throng court for his failed arraignment. Protest in Ibadan over arrest, detention. FG must be fair in handling his case. Gani Adams, that's on page 3. So pages 2, 3 packed for you this morning. But that's not all. Remember the conversation we had just moments earlier. Take a look at this one right under the nameplate. Oyo uncovers 41 ghost workers as 341 with regular records opt for voluntary retirement. You know, my knock right. And you know, when we see ghost workers, I mean, it's a term we've gotten used to, and a lot of times we just smile or laugh at the term ghost workers. But this clearly means that 41 people are probably getting salaries that they're not meant to be getting. So imagine paying salaries essentially for nothing. Or I mean, ghost workers mean different things, really. But
why is it that they never end? This ghost working or ghost workers, you know, there's several reasons.
How did their names get in?
Politicians can answer.
Oh, well, I guess.
Yeah, if you say keep sending your cronies, those who've done jobs for you, and then you see it's not just in civil service, in security agencies, in several other agencies. These are part of the challenges. You say they are headlamps, but goodness me, these headlamps cause a lot of challenges.
No, maybe sometimes they are the drivers.
Oh,
so there are, and then there are conductors, the agberos who call people into the vehicle.
Don't say.
I think you should write a paper on that, really.
No, sincerely, guys, what we are talking about, I mean, okay, for how many years has the government of Oyo State, for instance, been paying ghost workers? If we are to do the calculation, I think there was one state government that said, okay, we've located you, you are ghost workers, you need to return all the money that you've collected over the years. Yeah, I mean, I don't remember, it was very, very recent, within the past 6 months or 1 year or so,
Wow.
So how is that going to happen?
So that's revenue leakage right there, right?
Certainly.
Sort of. So page 4 of the Nigerian Tribune for more details on that one. And this one has been making the rounds. Emir gives nomadic herdsmen 30 days to leave Emirates. And he was quite vehement about that. And you can imagine what he had gone through, his people had gone through before they had to make that statement. It's on page 3 of the Nigerian Tribune this morning. Emir gives nomadic herdsmen 30 days to leave Emirates. There's politics for you, just in case you want to spice it up this morning. APC will soon pick consensus presidential candidate. That's according to the secretary ahead of the 2023 elections. What do you think about that? And some other stories right there on the front page. Just one more. Editors caution NBC over persistent anti-media policies. It's a page 2 read of the Nigerian Tribune this morning.
The Daily Times newspaper has maybe just 2 stories, but one of them, the main one, how I evaded bandits after my jet was shot down. Air Force. Well, that's because the story that led the previous paper that we just mentioned says bandits are ruthless as Boko Haram insurgents. Find the story on the front page, continues on page 2. And that story, in black, so to speak, time to stem growing economic inequality in Nigeria. What does that mean, really? Find the details on the inside pages. You see a reference to a story back in the 50s or 60s. Zik plans new survey of Nigeria's economy. Not bothered about who is going to lead Africa. Interesting read you'll find on the front page of the Daily Times newspaper this morning.
Okay, take a look at Daily Trust. Insecurity, Zamfara, Kebbi, Nigeria lead as gunmen kill 1,031 Nigerians in 1 month. 390 kidnapped. Northwest, North Central, top fatality. Nigeria overwhelmed, needs help. Retired colonel. How to reverse trend, security expert. I tell you, there's been several expert opinions in terms of what to do, how to address these challenges and things like that. So, but you never know. And then you see the reported number of people killed and kidnapped in June. You see the bar charts indicating fatalities and the abductions from northwest up until the south in that representation. Total abducted 390 and then total killed 1,031. The paper so captions that one there. Small-scale farmers raise alarm over poor access to fertilizer. So you just you see these kind of headlines. You only hope is addressed in good time, such that it doesn't impact the overall target of getting food security. But yeah.
So if you add the perspective of the first story, that's the lead story, and that one that you talked about, it's huge. We're talking about food insecurity, and we know that the three most hit regions are what you would call, they supply significant quantity of food in the country. So if there is such a level of insecurity in those areas, goodness me, where are we going? How are we even going to be able to solve the problem of farmers being able to go to the market at all, much less even use the fertilizer?
That's Daily Trust.
Okay. The Blueprint newspaper is next, and look at the lead on the front page. Benue, 3-month-old baby, 12 others killed, 2 women abducted, 6 kidnapped in Abuja, 80-year-old Bayelsa SSG's mother kidnapped, 100 victims regain freedom in Zamfara, medic freed in Kogi. The story is on page 6, certainly something scary. And look at the story right under the picture you see there. External loan. Senate adopts audit report on AGF over $274.2 million loss. Auditor General's report, gentlemen, recommends sanction of indicted officials. I'd be interested to find out exactly what that sanction is. But then if you are as well, stories on page 5 of the Blueprint newspaper this morning. Right under the nameplate.
I'm sorry, $274.2 million.
Dollars.
Just imagine if a company were to lose that, what will the company's next line of action be? How urgent will that move be? And
verily, verily, I say unto you, there's going to be a drastic job loss if it's a private sector.
so imagine these drains time and again, yearly, monthly.
In the first place, I don't know what year's Auditor General's report this is. And, okay, it's Senate adopts audit report on AGF. So, we have lost $274.2 million. And the stories continue on the inside pages. You can find out the details. Blueprint, right under the nameplate, Igboho orders. Oni rallies Southwest leaders on truce. The story continues on page 6 of the paper this morning. Good morning, Markwe.
Good morning, gentlemen. It's a cool, rainy morning here in Abuja. In some parts, it's already raining heavily. In other parts, the clouds are gathering. Whatever the case is, it's a work day. I want to believe that people here in the Federal Capital Territory will be on their way to work or will start getting ready. But usually what happens is that most people, I don't know, depending on maybe when they plan their leave for, they take the entire week of the holidays. Let's take a look at what leadership has on the front page for you this morning. INEC to procure 200,000 e-voting machines, invite 49 vendors. So it was seem, I don't know, is that like, that's the National Assembly's business. They can say whatever it is they want to say. We will go ahead and do what it is we want to do or what we have to do. It's a page 4 read. INEC to procure 200,000 e-voting machines, invite 49 vendors. Experts estimate losses from non-assent to electoral bill. Rejection of e-transmission of election results may spark revolt. ADC warns. Look at all these other stories at the bottom there. Parents of Islamia pupils raise another 30 million naira ransom. You know, it's very, I don't know how anyone can imagine it, that children are still out in the cold. The weather has really, I don't know, it's been really cool. If you like the cool season like I do, you wouldn't mind it. But you wouldn't like to be out in the cold without a roof over your head, without anything hot or warm to eat, without things to make you warm or keep you warm. It is, I don't know. But the leadership has stayed on this particular story, bringing us constant updates on what is the fate of the pupils of the Islamia school in Niger State. But there is some hope it will seem on the horizon, because you see right there, military combs Niger forests. So it looks like there is something being done about it. Let us hope that there will be results at the end of the day. It's a page 7 read right there. And look at this. Nigeria loses 13 billion naira to non-implementation of Procurement Act. Okay, it's a page 4 read for you as well. A number of other stories on the corner there, and this one too is there. Editors caution NBC over anti-media policies. Let's leave it there for leadership newspapers.
Okay, take a look at News Direct next. Yoruba Nation protests rock Cotonou, Ibadan over Igboho's detention. Groups to present petition at 76th UN Assembly. So it appears as though, well, they're going to be taking it beyond. Wow. Okay, that's the lead one right there. And then you get to see what BPE affirms acquisition of Yola Disco by Quest Electricity Nigeria. Okay, so and then there's several others here really, but we're gonna have to let you take a look at what I just said.
Did you see that story about NDLA arresting 2 ladies for allegedly trafficking illicit drugs in Benue? And
Yeah,
it's quite an interesting one with the aliases and the rest.
oh dear, it's all over these days.
Oh yes.
And then that one about DPR denying a subsidy removal will spike fuel price. Okay, so what then is the truth?
Okay.
Let's quickly take a look. Are you asking me for the truth?
No, for
I
the
don't
paper
have
actually.
information on that. But New Telegraph I have, and it looks. Look at this: insecurity, fresh recruitment of 10,000 police constables stalled as police commission awaits presidential directive. Yeah, that's what I have for you. It's on the front page of New Telegraph. You have a number of other stories. Look at this one at the bottom. NIPC, investors' commitment to Nigerian project records 99.8% increase. So it looks like there is faith in investing in Nigeria. $10.11 billion spread across 14 states. Manufacturing pulls highest inflow. And you also see this one here, privatization, BPE freezes planned IPOs on selected firms. Public apathy on shares triggers decision. LME Petrochemical, Nigeria Re-Inclusive. So that story is also there for you. You have a number of other stories there. Just beneath the nameplate, Senate asks AGF to sanction his officers over 54.1 billion naira loss. So whose officers? Is it the AGF's officers or the Senate's office? I don't know. You might want to read the story to make sense of that. And there is some back and forth here between the two major political parties. Ologbondiyan, APC wants to turn Nigeria to a one-party state. And APC retort, 2023, APC denies Buhari's alleged third-term plot, plans consensus candidate. So that's from Akpando Edehe. That's also there as well. And this very sad and disturbing one, gunmen abduct Bayelsa SSG's mother, second time in 8 years. I don't know. It was sort of trauma that woman would, eventually have. Just when somebody is recovering from that sort of trauma, then it happens again. Deja vu. Is that deja vu? Will it qualify? Just asking. Well, let's leave it there for New Telegraph. Gentlemen.
Well, yeah, that ends it with a look at some of the dailies here, actually. Well, back in a moment. Stay with us.
The Electoral Act Amendment Bill is one of the most polarizing pieces of legislation in the Ninth Assembly. Nigerians have yearned for the passage of this critical bill, believing it will sanitize elections which have been overwhelmed with violence, ballot box snatching, underage voting and cash for votes.
Clause 52(3).
But Clause 52, subsection 3 on electronic transmission of results caused a huge strain in both the Senate and House of Representatives, setting lawmakers from the ruling party against their colleagues in the opposition party. It is also causing uncertainty in the public space as to the intention of Parliament in promoting credible elections and the fate of electronic transmission of results in future elections. Section 52, subsection 3 of the report in the Senate states that the Commission may transmit election results by electronic means where and when practicable. But an amendment to the clause which caused a rift among lawmakers was adopted and the Electoral Act Amendment Bill passed.
The Commission may consider electronic transmission of results provided the national coverage is adjudged to be adequate and secure by the National Communication Commission (NCC) and approved by the National Assembly.
The House passed the Electoral Act Amendment Bill and retained Clause 52, which empowers INEC to decide on the best means to transmit election results. It also adopted a motion deleting the use of electronic means in the bill. But some members of civil society organizations questioned the amendment of Clause 52, subsection 3 by the Senate.
INEC cannot be subject to NCC. INEC is only subject to National Assembly because they make rules. That's the Electoral Act. At the public hearing, it was audible to the deaf. The blind could see that everybody wants the digitalization process in our electoral system.
It could have been better if the National Assembly had created a framework for some form of synergy between the NCC and INEC and say, okay, how can you work together? You can even do a pilot. You can even do a pilot to say, we want to pilot this process in 6 states. It's a learning process.
But these public analysts are reminding Nigerians that despite the controversial amendment of Clause 52, subsection 3 by the Senate, there are some gains in the bill which will have huge impact on future elections.
The funny thing is that the same Clause 52 that people tend to argue about also has its own positive. 52, there's 52, 1, 2, 3, depending on Senate or House of Reps. The 52 gave for the very first time in our electoral architecture an e-voting platform. That should be celebrated. And both the Senate and the House of Reps, I'd agree on that. The dispute is just the transmission.
Both chambers are to come up with a harmonized bill, and it's not clear what will be the final position of Parliament on the matter of electronic transmission of votes. Nevertheless, the expectation is that ultimately the National Assembly will produce a legislation to make future elections more credible and transparent, and President Buhari will sign the bill well ahead of the 2023 general elections to give INEC enough time to prepare. Linda Akibi, Channels Television News.
Welcome back. Yes, indeed, Professor Ademola Abbas joins us next. He is an international law expert and a global affairs expert as well. Good morning, Prof. Thank you for joining us today on the program. Well, you know, looking through all that's been going on, and perhaps will go on, we've seen the National Assembly make laws, we've seen different people occupying leadership positions, how they go about things, matters of state. And then there are huge questions. I mean, you have advised governments, you know, at different stages. And looking through all of these things, there seems to be just one recurring question, our leadership recruitment process. Many think that once we get that right, we just may see so many other things fall in line. Give us your impression about how you've seen things pan out, say, well, most recently. And Prof, if you don't mind, could you just mute the volume, the sound coming from your TV set?
I don't actually have my TV on, so I'm
No, because we see something howling back. It appears so. All right,
okay.
go ahead then.
Is it okay now? Any better?
Okay, it is now.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Imagine, for having me. Good morning to you. Hope you had a good break. And look, it's just disheartening, to say the least, that at this stage of our life in Nigeria, how many years after independence, we haven't managed to get elections right. I listened to one of your speakers who just spoke a few minutes ago. I think you played it short. Who said that we should celebrate the fact that the National Assembly even agreed to, electoral voting and so on and so forth. That's to be congratulated. No, look, I think we have a very minimalist view of our democracy and of where we should be today as a country. We got independence in 1960, for goodness sake. If there's one thing we should have got right, it is at least electing people to put in office. And I think that gentleman, I will have said to him that it is important that we got that one from National Assembly. But what is far more important is that, or what is equally important is how the election results are transmitted. So we cannot be celebrating that we have electronic voting while we are saying, no, so it doesn't matter what happens. That is not, it shouldn't be the approach. The whole brouhaha in the National Assembly, whether we are going to be transmitting election result electronically or not, is not something we should be dealing with in the digital age. For goodness sake, how do you carry results from one part of the country to another, from this to another to Abuja, and so on and so forth in 21st century? These are questions that we should have put behind us. Be that as it may, this is Nigeria. But what is again more troubling is when you begin to see what pans out in National Assembly in terms of, what actually underlines some of the decisions taken, or even sometimes, I'm sorry to say, the processes in the National Assembly itself. Incidentally, I was in Abuja in those days when this particular act was going through the Assembly, and I sort of, was able to see things a bit much closer, probably, than if I was not in Abuja, because I was within that particular premise and this and that. So I don't, I think it's high time we began to ask ourselves some critical questions. Putting good leaders in position begins with making sure you have credible processes that, are devoid of all these self-interest driven, strategies, let me call it that way, which eventually, will not serve this country well at all. So I think for now, let's just say we need to wake up. We need to wake up to know that this is 21st century, especially in the post-COVID pandemic that we are hoping to get into very soon. Things cannot be done as they used to be done. We have to rethink how we do our things. And I think this is a wake-up call for all Nigerians to begin to go down that route.
Now, over time, we've seen, and I think we'll continue to see, Nigerians across the world holding their heads high, making their impact internationally. Many of them yearning to make an impact here as well in the country. But what we saw in some of those clips, incidentally, is the thinking, the mindset of the current leaders who are occupying those kind of positions. So it just looks as though you can't reconcile both. But haven't been at least somewhat close to some of them, advising in advisory capacity. What do you think really is the challenge with them here? Because many who want to get in feel the door is shut against them, so they can't get their impact, they can't get anything through. So what do you think is the main problem from up there?
Timberlake, that is a very important question. And I'm going to answer that, permit me, by going a little personal, because the personal is also public, as I'm sure you have said several times. I was in the UK for several years, I was in Europe for several years, and I yearned to come and lecture in Nigeria. I yearned to come and give back to my society. I taught in England for many years. I'm not going to mention a particular university now that had a vacancy for my position and literally asked me to apply for that job. And I said that's voila. So I threw an application for professorship of international law. All Punky and Dore should go through. That was in 2013 when I was planning to come back and give back to my society. Despite the fact that we had an interview, everything went okay, this and that. This is 8 years after I haven't got the result of that interview today. Simply because that application landed on the table of somebody who probably didn't want a diaspora, who has so many books out there, who came and did some teaching there to come on. I mean, you can multiply this experience. Just yesterday, somebody was asking me that, why don't you come and teach? I'm speaking from Ijebu in my hometown here. And I have some guests, and some of them said, why don't you come and lecture at Ogun State University, international? And I said to the person, the truth is, Nigerian universities are fiendishly political. They are so political that when a diaspora says, I want to come and teach you, it's as if you want to take the job of the vice chancellor or the job of the dean, or you want to stop somebody who is a senior lecturer there from becoming a professor like you. That is not the point. Nigerians need to understand, and we as human beings need to understand that your candle doesn't burn brighter just because it's taught your colleagues candle from burning. No. When you allow somebody else to put on their own candle, your light will burn brighter, but there'll be two lights in the room at the end of the day. So we have this mindset. It's Neolithic, to say the least. I can't understand why somebody would think anybody bringing their knowledge from the diaspora is coming to threaten you at home. Don't get me wrong, I am not being naive about sometimes the haughtiness of people who come from the diaspora who think they know it all and be all. I'm not overlooking that haughtiness. But you know what? We have as much haughtiness that come from the diaspora as we have in the system here. So the question is to think, to open our mindset. You have, I'm using schools, university, because that is my primary constituency. Just to answer your question on generic level. You have universities still operating the same syllabi they operated 25 years ago, still in Nigeria today. And you look at it and think, for goodness sake, what happens to modernism? What happens to modernization? Because we effectively shut the doors against those who want to come and help at home. That cannot be the way forward. And that also operates across board, whether it is in company, whether it is in government. Look, I used to work for an organization in Africa. Again, I won't mention name in those days. And there was this habit of people coming late. That's another thing in Nigeria. You say we have a meeting at 9 o'clock. In Nigeria, when the boss comes is when the meeting starts. The boss comes in at 12 o'clock. And he walks in or she walks in, she strolls in or he strolls in. He doesn't even say apology to anybody. As far as he or she is concerned, that is when the meeting starts. Meanwhile, human beings have been waiting for him or her for the past 2 or 3 years. And in those days, in that organization, I would say, excuse me, sir, Mr. Director, this meeting was supposed to start at 9 o'clock and this is 11 o'clock. You say, oh, they want like you people are in diaspora, this is Africa. When they say these people you are from the diaspora have started, it's an emotional blackmail to say you are so un-African. So just keep quiet. And that you can extrapolate, it has permeated all the gamut of our society. And I see that even when you're dealing with friends on a daily basis. But the question that for you as a diaspora is to say, do you want to take this and run with it and say, this is who I am. I am going to force you to change your own way to begin to see how human beings should behave. Or you want to, sort of give into that and join them. That's why Nigerians say, if you can't beat them, join them. That is sad. That is capitulating. That is giving into frustration. So the long and short is that as much as Nigerians should try to make sure we begin to change our attitude to receive help. Look at the insecurity in Nigeria. What is wrong from learning from countries that have gotten it right? Look at the way we organize our lives. You think in Rwanda today they are fighting about whether it is transmission, e-transmission, this and that. How do you electronically transmit election results? How do you transmit, JAM results electronically? How do you get NIN right? How do you get, MN? And when it comes to the most pivotal thing that in people's life, in terms of deciding who will govern them for the next 4 years, you are telling me that a country of 200 million people, the largest economy in Africa, cannot put masks in places that are not covered today electronically. What are we talking about? They're just kidding ourselves. The truth is.
So my apologies. There was something you said earlier, when you began to respond to Chamberlain's question, and it just raised, an issue that we began our conversation with on the program this morning. Because most of the time when we talk about the leadership, we're talking about the people that many people see. But then you have also referenced some unseen forces. I mean, even from your own experience as well, you may want to cite that. I mean, you've just referenced a little bit of that. So how significant is the public service in the effectiveness or otherwise of governance in Nigeria, whether at the state level or at the federal level?
Yeah, thank you so much. That's $1 billion question. Because look, whether we like it or not, the private sector is huge, is humongous, is savvy, is efficient, as they want to say. But the public sector, public service is extremely critical. Whatever ideas you have, and I'm talking as somebody who had the opportunity of working in Lagos State as a special advisor to Governor Ambody on overseas affairs and investment. So just to break it down, I ran investment for Lagos State for 4 years under Akinmi Ambody's government, and also what we call overseas affairs, which is like foreign affairs at the state level. So I had a first-hand information or experience of what you are talking about in terms of the public service. Whatever decisions you want to take, whatever ideas you have, the buck stops at the table of the person who is in charge, who stands there. Look, I am talking here on the national television. I used to say very arrogantly that if there's any investor, anybody came to do business in Nigeria, within or outside Nigeria, that I took a penny from when I was in government, they can come out. That is the truth. Because the buck stopped at my table. I gave directives to my lieutenants. I gave directives to everybody I think I had about 82 people in my ministry when I took up the reins of the administration in what we call Lagos Global in Lagos State at that point in time. And see, a lot of diaspora, a lot of us will come in to think, there's a term they use for civil servants, they call them evil servants, where they believe that civil servants are evil, they are this and that. But the truth is no. I came to Lagos State, I came to public service sector in Lagos State with an open mind. I was going to discover, and you know what? I discovered in Lagos State government, in Lagos State public service, I discovered some of the most brilliant minds I've ever worked with are in that place. As also, I discovered some of the people who are going to make your life hell because you wouldn't allow ABC to work. You know what? But the truth is, it was very clear. Was I going to allow ABC to work? At the end of the day, you pay a price. And make no mistake, I paid my own price at the very highest level. You pay a price that you're not going to go through that path. Public service is the most pivotal when you're running a country, when you're running a state. The private sector will only thrive when you have sane policies coming from the public service. Look at what is going on today in Nigeria. Which investor is coming to a country that you are not sure whether you go to bed today at 350 naira to $1 and you wake up at 700 naira to $1? Let me give you an example. A few months ago in this country, and people say, some people have their kids overseas cannot complete. Some kids who are born there, they never come to Nigeria. So when you are parents, you are bound to pay their fees overseas rate, right? At the end of the day, some months ago, you could pay overseas rate to kids who are in universities overseas or who are in high school. Suddenly overnight, you woke up one day.
Part of what you were saying, I just wanted to ask, perhaps you may want to add that to the conversation you are having with us. Are you by any way saying that the leadership would have to depend on the followership in the civil service, irrespective of the quality? Because whenever anyone is looking at whether or not government is doing well or not, the only thing they are seeing are the people that they can see, the politicians, the appointees of government that have been recruited by the person who was elected into office. But most of the time, just as you are saying now, a number of people, no one is going to know that there is any evil genius that you are referencing right there that's saying, okay, this is the person that is not making me to do my job, making my life hell, to use your exact words. So what then do we need to do? Because it's sounding like no matter how brilliant a leader is, he's not going to succeed unless he has the kind of civil service that can help him to succeed. Give Nigerians the kind of leadership that they want.
Is that question to me or you are to the gentleman?
Yes, it is. It is to you, sir.
Oh, thank you, because the beginning was cut. No, you are spot on there. Look, followership must be as courageous as leadership. That is very, very important. You and I can sit and blame our leaders, but the question is, when it comes to the level in which you have followers operating, what do they do? And that's why I use the examples. I was lucky when I was in government to have some incredible human beings who served me in that particular office. And that might be because also they read my body language that I will not tolerate nonsense from anybody. That is number one. And I was able to look at whoever I had to look at in the eyes and say, look, this is not what I'm going to play. And I wouldn't play. So when a leader, a good leader, when a leader gives good direction, you'll be surprised that people will follow. People will lie behind you. And I hate to use this particular example because it divides Nigeria. When Tony Ediagbon and Buhari were there, I'm sure previous Buhari and Ediagbon, Nigerians remember Ediagbon probably a lot more than they remember Buhari of that particular regime. Yes, don't get me wrong, I'm talking about a military regime which was almost dictatorial. But the same Nigerians, who some people will call indiscipline, fell in line. They were killed. You couldn't pee on the street in those days. Not because Ediagbon was there, but because the fear of the respect of the law and that the law will catch up with you was there. But when you are in a country in which it is the police, it is the military who are taking one way, who are violating, who are beating citizens on the street, what do you expect from the followers? So when you do that to me on the street, I take it out on when I get to work. So the person sitting on that table, a clerk, a level 4 officer, a level 7, level 8, will do exactly what he or she sees the boss doing. That is the point. That is very important. So both are very important, but courageous followership is as important as courageous leadership. The question is, are many Nigerian workers, are many Nigerian public sector, are they courageous? It's $1 billion question because look, you might say, well, some of them say, look, that's deep. I can choose, if I'm in public service, to be courageous, to say, look, I can't do these things if you don't want to take your job. Because I was a professional before I joined this government, I will be when I leave the government. How many people are on 30, 40, 50,000 salary per month, with no hope that if they leave that job, they will get anything in the next 2-3 years, can take that decision? That is a big question. And number two, how much training, how much continuous training do we do to the core people that we train in public service? No. Somebody comes in with a certificate, they come in, you dump them there, and that is the end of the story. What values do we actually see in the public service at the end of the day? So you can replicate these. And these are the unseen forces, that's the most pivotal forces that you can never see. The person who sits, look, a leader is as strong as the weakest link in a particular organization. Whether you are Mr. Buhari today or you're Mr. Governor of any state, the quality of your advisors is important. I'm not talking about people who are just giving jobs because they were loyal to one political party. They were what they call omegbe, people in the party. They must eat and they must all these silly things. I'm talking about credible special advisors, whether you are special senior advisor, whatever you are. When you have the opportunity to advise the government, what do you do? Let me use this last example, and I'm using personal examples because they will bring this thing home. We had a country interested in doing smart city in Lagos State when I was at the helms of affair. And we allocated 1,001 hectares of land to them at that point in time. Normally, when you get a piece of land, you have 99 years. But I was in charge of investment. I wasn't going to hand over 99 years of lease when I wasn't sure that organization would not come and change the whole idea. And I told Mr. Governor, Mr. Governor, I am not happy to hand over 99 years of Lagos land, 1,000 hectares, not acres, to this organization. They must prove good intention. And he said, what do you want to do? I said, well, what I want to do is, I'm going to limit this to 10 or 15 years, max. But I went for 5 years. We went back and forth and we agreed on 15 years. Let's give them 15 years or 10 years first. If within 5 years of the benchmark, you're able to do some of the things they commit to, then we can begin to expand. And guess what? We did, they couldn't. And we never gave that CFO out. That was how we protected people's commonwealth. That is the point. Again, you could say I had the opportunity of saying that because maybe, I had a particular strength when I was in that particular office, but that is not the case. Many people have the same strength, but they buckle at the slight opportunity that, they don't want to fall out with ABC or they want to be seen as a good guy. No. My loyalty, that's another thing in public service. Your loyalty should be to the state, should be to the people, not to one person in office. It's very important. Nigeria is one country that will keep on making mistake of thinking loyalty is equal to servitude. I am loyal to you, Ayo or Chamberlain, doesn't mean that I'm a slave to you. If any of you makes a mistake, I will look at you and say, Mr. Ayo, Mr. Chamberlain, you are making a mistake. This cannot be right. If that is to be seen as disloyalty, so be it. That is the point. So, but you have many people in the public service at any level, whether you are commissioner or special advisor or anything, or minister or whatever, they are always afraid. They are always scared that they don't want to be seen as disloyal.
I think you just raised an important point, really, and I think I've heard this time and again across, the corridors of power, the yes men, people too afraid to speak truth to power, or at least give the right kind of advice. But, I'm glad that this conversation has taken us through the academia, the private sector, now, civil service, governance, and you've given, practical examples, which, like you said, bringing this point home. But let me maybe go a little bit philosophical here, because there are different maxims that you hear around in Nigeria. When you hear that people get the kind of leadership or leaders they deserve, it's like the leaders are a true reflection of the kind of people that you have in the society. And another says that, well, those leaders make the leadership recruitment warped such that the worst of us lead the best of us. Which of these maxims, if you may, are treason for you?
Kyle, that is, that's a question that will throw anybody off the course at any point in time, because you brought two very contending situations, which is absolutely apt. Look, it is an aphorism to say people deserve the kind of leaders that they get, but is that really true of Nigerians? To say that is to assume that what we call in economist terms, ceteris paribus, when all things are equal. Well, are all things equal for Nigerians? Look, I don't like to pontificate too much. We blame Nigerians that they get the kind of leaders that we deserve, but that cannot be true. I don't deserve the kind of crass leadership that we have in the country today. But the question is, even at my level, at your level, Coyote, at Ayos level, Chamberlain's level, with all your exposure and everything, how much control do you have in your leaders? Let alone when you talk about ordinary people in the ordinary workers, market women, and so on and so forth. People who are struggling to even put one meal on their table on a daily basis. You know what they want? What ordinary Nigerians want is not so much. All they want is effective leadership. They wouldn't care whether Buhari today rides 1 billion jets, in as long as they wake up in their house, they have places to go without being harassed on the street. In as long as there's security, in as long as they have money to put their kids in schools, in as long as they have food on their table. So the aphorism that if people get the kind of leader they deserve, assume that everything is ceteris paribus, everything is equal. But things are not equal in Nigeria at all. And the same thing with the second level. That the truth is, what happens? Why do we have we have the worst of all sometimes in government? Look, mention most developed country you have in the world. UK, US, this and that. The best people go into politics. I remember one of the taunts against Gordon Brown when I was in the UK, when he was the Prime Minister. They used to say, well, he never went to Oxford, he never went to Cambridge and this and that. Or he went to St. Andrews and whatever. This and that. Meanwhile, he went to one of the finest schools in the United Kingdom. But that tells you how much premium they place on where people school, where people get education from. I'm not saying just go through that, because sometimes we have some Nigerian leaders haven't gone through this particular kind of education system. So it goes beyond that. Who go into our politics today? The problem also is for the youth. Ask a youth, you want to go into politics? Oh, hell no. It's a bloody waste of time. It's too dirty. I can't get it. You know what? That is the truth. Those who are smart, those who are intelligent, think that politics is too dirty to get their hands dirty. And so
okay, so Prof, just give us a moment. We'll talk about what then would you advise be done from that train of thought. That will be in a moment. Do stay with us. All right, welcome back, Prof. As we, just move on to winding down this segment. So, in terms of solutions, a couple of things come up. Yes, in addition to the point you were making about young people coming in, making an impact, could you add to that? How do we also do that whilst weaning ourselves of our ethnic biases, which seems to have, take the better part of us most times?
Chamberlain, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes.
First and foremost, it's high time youth got involved in politics. If they sit back and they keep on, you can keep on whinging and complaining every day. All these oldies are not going away. They are going to sit tight. You fight for it. You don't hand it over to you on a platter. Freedom is not served a la carte. It's a common aphorism. Number two is you look at Nigeria today and you ask a simple question. How best can you make politics attractive to the youth. Look at the National Assembly, for instance. What if you decide to make it a part-time issue? If I'm a doctor, if I'm a lawyer, I don't necessarily want to give up my professional life to come and do politics full-time, because I'm thinking, and I've been there before, what if I go into it and I don't like it and I have to come out? What do I go back to? But when you make it a part-time job for me, when I can still retain my job and have a timetable that allows me to go and do politics on part-time, I may find that sexy. I may find that more pragmatic for me to get into. You know, then you mentioned, you know, issue of tribalism, ethnicity. It's a shame. It's a shame because most of the problems that Nigeria is grappling today are a making of the gross incompetent leadership that Nigeria is saddled with. And I'm not talking about just today's leadership, which are the peak of incompetence. I'm talking about leaderships even gone past, years gone past. Look, I told somebody, when the person said, what is the problem with Nigeria? I said, we can't blame God. But God seems to have given Nigeria everything apart from leadership, apart from good leader. And the person said, but God gave us good leader. Maybe we just did not find a way of discovering them. I said, yeah, you are right. Thank you. God gave us everything, but we have failed to be able to engineer good leadership that will take us to this. Look at a country like South Korea. What do they have? Look at some countries like Singapore. What do they have? These are tiny, tiny countries who are commanding economies in the world. All we shout is we are the giant of Africa. We have 200 million people. People are tired of hearing that over and over. So the long and short of this is that Nigerians need to come together, you know, and that will have to start, I'm hoping, with the government being less arrogant. I've never seen a more contemptuous, by the way, a more contemptuous and a more arrogant government anywhere in the world than the current one we have in Nigeria. And I say it as a Nigerian. I have no fear of anything at all. Because my worst fear is that we might be gradually sleepwalking into dictatorship. Any government that in 21st century is thinking of gagging the media, then what do you have? What do you want to live with people? Security is gone out of the window. Job is gone out of the window. Sanity has gone out of the window. The only thing we still have today that I even know that I'm a Nigerian is because I wake up and I can read newspaper. I wake up, I can watch Sunrise Daily. I wake up, I can listen to news. I know what is going on. And if any government is now thinking that they are going to take that away from me, then they're asking for a very, very serious problem. So I think...
Just one thing, you know, bothers me. I mean, you said something earlier about, you know, people coming into dirty politics. You know, that brought an analogy to my mind. When you want to clean a set of plates, you have to first of all get your hands dirty with those plates before you can clean them. Now, the challenge here now is how do we get youths who are the most populous demographic of voters in Nigeria to be interested in politics at all, even as it is. I mean, you've talked about what we could do, but for now, this is what we have. This is the way we have politics in Nigeria now. If the apathy continues, the leadership process is not going to change. So how do we even get the young people to be interested in order to be able to motivate them to get their hands dirty in order to get it clean?
Thank you very much, Ayo. Policies are very important. That's why I say this begins with the government. We keep forgetting that one of the problems with the Electoral Act, the amendment bill, was not just Section 52.3 talking about transmission. It's also the fact that they've increased the financial outlay for campaigns 5 times. I'm sure you know that. 5 times. So the elections of governorship, which was at least on paper 200 million naira before, is now 1 billion naira. Now, how do you want to get youths involved in that kind of government? Even at 200 million naira, and I'm not saying that it's only 200 million naira a governor will stand to become governor in Nigeria. We all know that is just absolute nonsense. But you know what? That is at least on paper. It's on paper that statutorily, you cannot do more than 200 million naira. But now they're now saying statutorily, if this bill is passed eventually, it's been passed, if it is assented by the Mr. President, they're now saying you can't be a governor unless you have 1 billion naira at least. So you are talking about encouraging youth. But at the same time, you have a government that is now making campaign form for those who want to go into elections 5 times. Where would youth get kind of resources from? Then number 2, why don't we find a way of demonetizing politics completely? Why Does anybody have to think if they are not multi-millionaire or hundreds of billionaires, they cannot run for public offices? But number 3, which is very pivotal, youth must also lower sight. And we have that problem during the last election when you have a lot of youth coming out, they want to be president. Look, for goodness sake, presidency, governorship, commissionership, ministerships are not the only political office you can influence in your society. You can begin from your district. You can begin from your locality. You can actually influence by talking to people, by awakening their consciousness, by telling them, look, don't take 1,000 naira from somebody trying to buy your vote for the next 4 years. So what I'm talking about is youth involvement must go beyond just participating in elective offices. No, it might be at advocacy level. That is the point. Not all of us are interested in going to run for campaigns. People are not interested. Some people are not interested in that. But I want to say, if genuinely I want to mobilize my society to say, do not vote for Mr. A because he is going to buy your vote and is going to sentence you and your children to the next 4 years of penury. Don't do it.
Speaking about that, Prof, you know, you make an interesting point because, I mean, Hong Kong, very good example of how perhaps to approach this. The young folks, they didn't just go for the highest position, they mobilized themselves and then they grabbed a lot of those local seats and then they want to just move and inch, you know, until they get to the top. But in conclusion, and speaking about vote buying and the role finance play, we've had some politicians who have been here and they tell us, look, citizens are part of the problem. When we go to campaign, they always keep telling us in local parlance, drop something. And that it's not just your rhetoric that will suffice for us. And so they think that, well, when they do that, they then feel, you have nothing to ask me in the next 4 or 5 years. After all, you made me, I mean, quote unquote, pay for it at this point. So they seem not to have any voice anymore. That is the challenge, isn't it?
It is a big challenge, Chamberlain. There's no running away from that. In Ogun State here, I won't mention a particular governor. I was still back at home before I traveled, and the gentleman was in power. Whenever people went to him in those days, he would say, hey, please don't disturb me. I've paid you your money. You got money from me to get your vote. So it is real. It's a real problem. But the question is, Chamberlain, let's ask ourselves the question. Why will a people get to the level of holding their political leaders or politicians to ransom? Because a ransom is a kind of ransom. If you don't give me money, I'm not giving you my vote. It's a ransom. It's not only when you are kidnapped that you get ransom. You can get, this is electoral ransom they're asking for. Because they know when that person gets in power, he is not going to look back at them at all. Look, a governor said of recent went to a street very close to him somewhere and he said, I didn't know this road was as bad as this. That road was literally in his backyard. The truth is, how well do our leaders know our people? That is very important. How well do you know the areas you actually govern? So people are helpless. Nigerians are helpless. Nigerians are hungry. And Nigerians are being used and dumped over and over and over again. So when a Nigerian knows there's no social security system in Nigeria, if they don't have a job, no government looks after them. They know that for sure, except if somebody's going to do the funeral of their father or their mother and they can spray money and they can get some of that money at the end of the day to ensure for their life. Those are the kind of things that Nigerians look up to. So I know that when this politician comes to my district to come and campaign, if I don't get 1,000 naira from him, it's not even going to look at me at the end of the day. Even the worst of it is when they go for their delegations or the conferences and the national conference and this and that. It is not an ideal situation. But I'm saying, yes, we cannot really, at the end of the day, blame Nigeria. Fix this by policy. If the government is serious, fix it by politics. Look, let me just digress a bit. It's like slapping people on the hand because there's racism in football. You know, major football body will never do anything about it because they know what to do. The single thing to do is that if you tell the Premiership League today that if your fans are found to be racist in this and that, you as a club will be banned. Things will change. But when you say we are going to slap you, we're going to give you £50,000, what is that? That is the truth. So let the Nigerian government fix all this thing with policies and say anybody who goes to campaign, look, you and I woke up last week to a national obscenity. I'm sorry, I'm not condemning somebody celebrating their mom. I celebrated my mom when she died. But at least we're talking about defamation of, we're talking about facing the valuation of our currency, national currency. Apart from, I'm not even talking about societal values. But the question is, can Malami as the Attorney General today go after anybody when even his own son's wedding, Naira was sprayed in the breach of our constitution, in the breach of our law? If the son of AG committed that crime, can you go after anybody called Obi Kubana, anybody in the country, without setting the double standard? That is the point. That is a kind of dog-eat-dog situation you find yourself in when you do not allow the rule of law to be the most pivotal engineer in your society.
So we've got quite some hurdles to cross in our journey to nationhood as we look to almost every year. But we do thank you very much indeed for your perspectives this morning. Ademola Abbas is a professor of international law and a global affairs expert.
Thank you very much.
Well, up next, we'll hear from politicians themselves, those who have been accused of where we are today. They'll find out in just a moment. Don't forget, you can also weigh in via your emails, as always. We're back in a moment. Don't go away. Welcome back. Yes, indeed, Honorable Mark Gbela is a member in the House of Representatives. He joins us from our studios in Abuja, but we'll also get to see former Minority Whip in the House of Representatives, Dr. Samson, will also be joining us. Samson Osagie is a Managing Partner in Law and Justice, so he's getting his legal sides back on, so we'll get to hear from him as well. But let me start with you, Honorable Gbela. Well, yeah, the country saw most recently, I don't think they'll forget in a long time, the scenario that played out in the National Assembly, and that they say, look, it speaks to leadership, it speaks to our recruitment process, it speaks to getting those institutions right, and if we can't get them right at that stage, it puts a lot more people who think they have a thing or two to contribute to building our nation off. And they say the blame, as a matter of fact, stops at the feet of politicians, of which you are one.
Good morning, Chamberlain. It's a pleasure being on the program this morning. And let me applaud you and commend Channels for highlighting this very critical aspect of our nation's development. It is not something we should take lightly or just address in one morning's program. It's something that we should probably institutionalize in our educational institutions, which is critical. But let me start to answer your question. The bane of our country's development is leadership. That is why this issue is so critical. And you see, Nigerians want to abdicate their responsibilities when they say the problem is politicians, because from the onset, they are supposed to guard and guide the leadership selection process, which is why the situation always seems as if it's a catch-22 situation, the hen or the egg kind of issue. Let me explain what I mean. For instance, we have started a process that is critical to the Nigerian society that will determine those who emerge as the leaders of this country, because we have chosen a democratic style of government which has certain checks and balances that must be put in place. Now, have Nigerians really shown that urgency to say, this is what we want and we are insisting on what we want? There are avenues to do so. There are ways they can go about ensuring that their representatives protect their interests. I'm talking specifically with regards to the Electoral Act. That singular aspect of transmission of results, for instance, which was very blatantly compromised by the Deputy Speaker playing the script of the APC-led government, is on its own going to disenfranchise majority of Nigerians of the true results of their votes. Now, Nigerians shouldn't give up in that regard. there's a registration process going on now. And these are ways in which I say the buck still stops with Nigerians. How many of us as Nigerians are turning up to register? How many of us are conscious that registration is critical to being able to determine what leadership will be chosen at different levels of government? And I also want to agree with your previous speaker when he talks about getting involved in politics. Some of us have never been in politics before. My first election was the first time I became a partisan person. I became a card-carrying member of a party. But the conviction I had was that if we all don't realize, even those of us who have Ivy League education, should put our hands to the plow, then the issue of leadership in this country will never be addressed. In some climes, in some societies, they actually think politics is meant for fraudulent and dubious people. But unfortunately, these are the people who determine the policy that drives our lives as Nigerians and as a country. This is not something we should joke with. And
right, let's equally get
it being something that should also be.
Pardon me. We'll of course, we'll get a lot more from me, but let's equally get Dr. Sage's perspective. He used to be in the House as a former minority whip, a position that made him a leader among leaders. Thank you again for joining us today. What would you say to this huge question, this challenge we face, and how to address them? Your opening. Dr. Sage, that's for you. No, you may need to unmute because we can't hear you yet. We still can't hear you. All right, Dr. Sage, we'll need to sort that out because we can't hear you yet, and so we'll hope to sort it out as soon as possible. Well, Mr. Gbela, we'll have to get back to you on this one now. So, yeah, having established that and how you got into politics, well, it then does appear as though, would you say you've been able to make the requisite impact having gotten there?
Well, that is for the constituents that I represent to determine, and for Nigerians in general also to determine. But individually and personally, I would say that within the limitations of my powers as a member of the legislature, I would say that I've tried to uphold, and that is why it is important, the kind of individuals that get into positions of office. I've tried to uphold what I believe is the best interest of the Nigerian people. I've tried to speak truth to power. I've tried to stand on the path of justice, equity, and truth. I have avoided everything that would compromise the mandate for which I have been elected. And these are things that squarely rest on the shoulders of the person in that office who is given that leadership opportunity. And that is why it is critical. I have not pursued personal gain against the general interest of the people. If you were to leave me alone now, everything in Nigeria would be fixed. Believe me. But I don't have that authority alone. I don't have that power alone. For instance, one of the critical things that is urgently required in this country is the issue of independent candidacy in part of our constitutional amendment process. In other climes, independent candidates are elected, far and in between. But in Nigeria, I want to tell you, it will be a revolution that will transform our political landscape, because we will now have the opportunity as politicians to approach the electorate directly.
Okay.
And
Honorable Gbela, I'd like you to shed a lot more light on this. How is this going to play out? Because, I mean, what we see with political parties is they talk about structure. We see them fight so much about handing over a structure or controlling the quote-unquote structure. So if one way an independent candidate, how is he going to, because you have to, when it has to do with voting at that level, you have to have agents who will supervise, ensure that things go right in your stead. And in some cases, when parties of which you could testify, when they pay an agent, if another party comes in and bids higher, the agent leaves that party and moves to the next one who offers him something higher. So if an independent candidature or candidacy comes in here, how is he going to square off with parties that have got resources, huge resources, for that election?
Now, this is where we should realize that the advantages will be with regards to an independent candidate. The people, let me start from the issue of the agent. Whoever would be the agent of an independent candidate will be doing so by personal conviction and volition, not financial motivation. And that is a more driving incentive and imperative for a human being in those circumstances than anything else. For you to be doing that when you know that this particular individual doesn't have the resources that other parties have, but you are convicted that this person is the one to deliver. And I can assure you, majority of Nigerians do not have a choice in our current political system, because whatever we churn out from our political parties is what they have to choose from. So when you give them that option of choosing somebody else, apart from that, I can assure you, majority of them will go for the people who they have seen have credibility. And one of the issues we have in our political system now is the issue of godfatherism. Political parties, in some instances, are at the behest of individuals. Our party selection process is part of the problem, just like we're talking about leadership selection process. It also happens, and it's also a problem within our political parties. People have interests about who they want to emerge. Our primaries, a lot of times in certain instances, are not transparent. We have a primary system that makes the cost of elections humongous and unreasonable, where people determine who becomes a candidate by inducement, by incentives. These are things that we know as Nigerians. These are things that will be eradicated if we had the issue of independent candidacy, because the person would only just approach the generality of the public and explain to them what he needs to do. Now, there's another issue we need to be aware of as Nigerians. In the Electoral Act, there's a provision for contribution to elections, but some of us are trying to look at whether we can have a standalone legislation, and something I'm working on that has to do with contribution to elections. We should realize as Nigerians that we have to play a part in determining who our leaders are. Many people are not motivated because of the current political system, where they know it will be manipulated during the primaries. They know whoever is going to emerge is because of the interests of certain godfathers and individuals. But if they had an independent candidacy and legislation that guides how to contribute, then I believe we should realize we have our own fate in our hands. We can come together as Nigerians. We need to start to be aware of this. Put the resources together to counter any money bag or to counter any party.
And I think it's important
to use financial inducement.
Right. I think it's important really to explore that that area. I mean, the money that makes politics tick, as it were. And it will be quite interesting to see what comes out of that in the coming days or months when you return from recess. But before we go to break, in just Honorable Mark Bila, now speaking of that expression, politics is a dirty game, which has been used time and again, and referencing that scenario that played out, the scuffle at the floor of the House just over the past week, what exactly was going through your mind? I mean, you were right in the middle of that. We saw Honorable Gagdi and some others. What kind of considerations? Because people were watching, and perhaps that will reinforce that conclusion that maybe politics is indeed a dirty game.
Okay, thank you very much. politics is not a dirty game. On the contrary, it is the means we have come as civilized members of the society globally to realize is the means we can bring governance to the people and be able to coordinate the implementation of policies to the general good of the people. Now, the issue we have in Nigeria specifically is it is the participants in politics who are dirty and irresponsible. With regards to that specific incident, the deputy speaker, who apparently now seems to have a personal grudge and vendetta against me. We all remember the whole Muta incident. I didn't know then that there was that personal grouse he has against me, but that was displayed during the course of this electoral act, because when some of us got up to express our dissatisfaction, he seemed to focus on me and try to rain invectives upon me. And what you saw transpired with Gabdi, a member from Plateau State, who is want to behave like a thug on the floor of the House, to seem to think that he alone has the sole prerogative to physical altercation. So after that incident, the deputy speaker told him that I abused him, which obviously that didn't happen. And then he came to physically confront me, you can imagine, on the floor of the House. Now, do you consider that to be politics? It is not. It's an individual who does not have the comportment and the pedigree to be able to realize that is an honorable house and you need to comport yourself in a decent and civilized manner. He came to confront me physically, and except for the intervention of other people, it will have really degenerated into an all-out fracas, because obviously as a human being, I have to defend myself. But you see, these are the kind of things that occur that make people think that it is politics that is dirty. It's not politics. It is the people who we do not take care to consider before we elect them. And these are part of the issues we have. In politics in Nigeria, our constitution, our laws say the party sponsors the candidate, but it is the other way around. The candidate sponsors the party. So this is a fundamental issue we have, and Nigerians should rise up and realize. Whoever brings money, wherever they get it from, is who the parties a lot of times choose to represent them, because they feel they will bring money to pump into the exercise. Can Nigerians please realize we have to rise up and start to put monies together so that candidates will be able to bear the cost of the electioneering process without compromise? This is part of the fundamental problems. In the parties that we have these days, without equivocation, I can tell you, whoever wields the most resources most of the time gets the ticket, because of the costs of electioneering that the party has no means of taking care of. And we should... Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you, Honorable. For a number of people, they believe that these are some of the critical issues. So let me quickly take this to Benin, where we have Dr. Samson Osage, who is a managing partner at Law and Justice Chambers, Abuja. We've been trying to get him for a while, former minority whip also of the House of Representatives. Honorable, I do not know if you agree with Honorable Magbila here, some of the things that he's talked about in the leadership recruitment process. But I would like your thoughts on some of the things you think can be corrected in that process, and you think that might have been addressed perhaps in this electoral act, which was quite contentious.
Well, thank you very much, Malkbe. I hope I can be heard now, because I heard you very clearly. I think that this is one topical issue that we need to continuously address. Because Chinua Achebe, a renowned international writer and poet, did put it in his book, The Problem with Nigeria. And the summary was that the problem with Nigeria is one of leadership. And I dare say that the issues that have been canvassed both by Professor Abbas and my friend Magbila are quite true and correct of our body polity as we speak today. It is one of the results of breakdown of values. Let's even start from the university system. How do you get good leaders recruited from a set of graduates that have been taught how to cheat in order to pass examinations? How do you empty such a set of people into the society and expect that when they are given positions of responsibility, they will perform well? That is one. Two, how do you get a leadership recruitment process right when all it takes to be able to get the ticket of a party, most of the time, is to be able to have as much money as possible to spend and be ready to finance the bills of the political party towards election? These are two critical points. And I dare say that what we need is a leader who will reposition and reset the political thinking of the political class as to how the best set of people can emerge within a political process. It's just like trying to fight corruption. If you want to fight corruption and then you are slapping people on the wrist, and then you think you are fighting corruption and then you are giving preferential treatment to some people who are considered special, then we can never fight corruption. Singapore fought corruption by jailing a minister who merely traveled with a businessman on a business trip and came back. He came back and was arrested and jailed, a minister of government. So the point is that we must be able to agree that we need to fix our country, and we need to give it a leadership that can drive a process that will lead to the development of our institutions of governance. Now, coming to the issue of the Electoral Act, you will know clearly that the debate about the Electoral Act, which of course turned the way it has done, it was purely partisan in approach. And that shouldn't be. And I believe that regardless of one party's affiliation, national interest must be paramount in the mind of everybody. I carry a party card, but that does not mean that I am not interested in the Nigeria that will be better for us. Because before the party comes the country. The country comes first. How do we continue to have an electoral process where the outcome becomes doubtful and court begin to set them aside? So to answer your question, I believe that the two plaguing challenges for leadership recruitment in our country is the fact that there are no more values that are being taught both from home and both from school, both from home and the school. And our institutions have been so degraded that they have come to understand certain things done in the Nigerian way. There is a Nigerian way that seems right to those who hold the reins of power. And if you do it the Nigerian way, you don't get a better result for the entire society. And the political parties are not helping matters because theirs is who pays the highest. And once you are looking for those who pays the highest, not those who have leadership leadership qualities. And that is why people can just be brought in from anywhere to take positions in government, whereas the party have not had the opportunity of knowing this person in terms of participation in the political process, in terms of contributing to the process, and even begin to understand his mental capacity to be able to handle issues of leadership in the politics. So I agree with him that most of the times we take into account partisan considerations in doing what we have to do, and that is not good for the system. And then the issue of money is playing a very big role in downgrading the quality of leaders that we are going to have, because the education we get and the training we get is not a determinant factor of how much you are able to make from the society. A lot of people go outside the education they have earned. Some don't even earn any education, and they're able to make more money from whatever source, and they come into the political process and shove everybody aside and bulldoze their way through. If those kind of guys get into political position, what do you think they will do? And that is the challenge we have.
The big question is, you know, what is being done to, are these conversations happening within political parties? For instance, you've talked about how it was sad, what we saw on the floor of the House. I mean, how things got to a heated end, so to speak, even though we later on heard that, you know, certain provisions had been made and were passed. But Are these conversations happening largely within political parties that country must come first? That, you know, there has to be a country before there are political parties, that political parties will not be sustained in the long run by this sort of attitude? I mean, are this sort of conversations happening within political parties from your own experience?
You know, the definition of a political party is that it is an organization that comes together for the purpose of capturing power. And the purpose of capturing power ought to be to develop a nation, provide for the citizens services, and protect them against danger. And that is why the Constitution says that the primary purpose of government is the provision of the welfare of the people and the security. Now, I do not hold any party position anywhere, but I can assure you that if these conversations were going on, then we will have less and less of these problems. And the kind of demonstrations of pure partisanship on issues of national interest in the legislature will not be the case. That is the truth of the matter. And I want to believe that unless and until we have leadership at both party levels and at governance levels, we are not going to have these discussions fully internalized within the party structure of any political party. And that is why, as we speak today, the political parties are not really entirely different from one another, because the primary purpose that they work towards is to capture governance and retain power. So I believe that these kind of discussions ought to form the bulwark of leadership training within political parties, so that at every level of the party, they are internalized to the extent that it is not about getting power that matters. It is about putting the nations first on issues that will benefit the nation and benefit the masses. And that is why our political campaigns are usually not issue-based. If they were issue-based, then you can understand that, oh, those who are going to come out from that political process, we have a scintilla of national interest guiding their actions when they do get to government. But because our campaigns, our political activities are really not issue-based across board, what we find is that our actions are guided by partisan consideration at all times. And that is not good for national development.
I think the natural question is, what do we do then to begin to correct this? You've talked about how broad the problem is. You've talked about university students who are cheating their way through schools. I think only recently the University of Benin asked the students to rewrite exams from 200 level till she's graduating now. She's supposed to be graduating now, but because she was said to have been wearing a T-shirt saying aggressive malpractice brought me to this point, the University of Benin has asked her to rewrite all her exams. If the problems are that broad and we begin to see them even more entrenched in our political process, because sometimes, you know, these things feed one into another. Society, they say, gets the sort of leadership that it deserves. Where would you say that we begin to address the problems from?
Yes, the ball will still stop on the table of those who hold the race of leadership today. I agree with Professor Abbas when he said that the current government can fix a lot of things through policies and sticking to those policies. For example, what UDBN has done to that student is a desirable one, and it sent a big signal to many students who believe that they have to cheat in order to get their way through. Same for the political parties and the government in power. I want to see a drastic action against persons who do not comply with certain rules and regulations that should guide their actions at both party levels and at government level. So unless we reset our political thinking, and I want us to reset our political thinking through policies and committed implementation of those policies and guidelines. For example, I like the approach that government is using to deal with secessionists, regardless of what anybody wants to say. And that kind of approach is one that sends strong signals to those who want to dismember this country. And that same approach must be applied to all issues across board. It should not be selective. If we have that kind of approach, to dealing with a problem head on without paying obeisance to certain considerations, primordial sentiments, and all other issues, then we are going to achieve results. Now, I also want to imagine, for instance, that if we pursue the issue of moral rearmament, value reorientation through policies that make heads of government institutions to brace up to the challenge of resetting the attitudes of the workforce within their control. And it goes through the entire government of government machinery. And the leaders do so in their respective areas by example. I am sure that government and the citizens are going to follow suit. Rwanda did not just become what they are today. They have to employ strict policy measures in order to inculcate into their citizens the right behavioral pattern that is expected of both the leaders and the led in order to have a country that they can collectively call their own. It is a crime in Rwanda today to throw a piece of paper on the streets. You will go to jail for it. But what happens in our setting when people breach the law, and depending on where you come from, or sometimes what faith you profess, nobody's going to ask you any question. So we must live a level where we are selective in our enforcement of laws, and then we are broad and general in some of the things we do. We must make it so broad. And I think government has a responsibility to drive this process. And the citizens must be reawakened. Sometimes we complain that even the followers are not even happy matters. Yes, they are not happy matters, because when it comes to the process of leadership recruitment, what most citizens are, looking for is what they can get from the entire process. I saw a video recently where some persons, whether in Ghana or somewhere, were rejecting bags of rice and demanding for jobs. Those are the kind of orientation and enlightenment that the citizens must get, and the kind of reaction that they must put up in order to be able to stem the tide of the degeneration of our value system that will make sure that we have a leadership recruitment process that benefits the entire citizenry and not just those who are elected into public office. So I suggest that policy measures and implementation must be driven by the leaders at every level of government, not necessarily at the level of the president or at the level of the governor. Leadership must be driven at every tier and at every level, whether private or public. The issue of you doing things
Dr.
the Nigerian
Samson
way
Asage, Dr. Samson Asage, we're totally out of time. We have to thank you for your contributions this morning. He's a managing partner of Law and Justice Chambers here in Abuja and also former minority whip of the House of Representatives. Let me quickly come to you, Honorable Bila, for your closing comments. I mean, he did say that he's quite happy with how the federal government is treating secessionists in the country, but he says it needs to be applied on a general level. You agreed with him on that?
Okay, yes. Let me appreciate my former colleague, my friend, Honorable Osagi, for his comment. I know he very clearly admitted he's a card-carrying member of the APC, and it is good when members of the ruling party speak to their own government. You know, I joined the National Assembly under the platform of the APC. Some of us spoke against what we believed was wrong before some of us left, when we didn't perceive or see any acceptance of the wrongs that were going on. The treatment of the secessionists should not be biased, like he rightly said. We have a country that has declared IPOB as proscribed IPOD, declared them as secessionists. But this same government, this is what we're talking about, leadership, this is not proper leadership, has refused to identify headsmen as terrorists, when every international organization, the United Nations, have tagged them as one of the terrorist groups in this country. We are going after Nnamdi Kanu. How many of the headsmen have been apprehended and prosecuted? Now, this does not speak to leadership. This is part of what we have an issue with.
Those who argue say that they're not under any known group or heading, so to speak.
No, but you have heard Mieti Allah severally own up about certain attacks. Even recently, there was a certain statement made against my governor about certain actions, about a certain group that was threatened except he reverses the anti-open grazing law. I'm sure you're aware of that, and several other instances like that. There are faces to these groups and these organizations. And even if you say there's no group, which there are, then it is still the responsibility of the government to make pronouncements and show by their body language that they are interested in tackling this issue as well. And that is not what we're seeing from the current leadership. We have leadership in this country at various levels who display crass irresponsibility. The Comptroller General of Immigration very recently physically assaulted one of my people from Benue. Is that display of leadership? There are certain issues we as a House are going to investigate also about allegations of he renting his property where they're having the Express Center in Abuja and several other issues. You know, this is what we experience. Your guest mentioned the Attorney General, who at several levels displays complete lack of leadership by his pronouncements, equating the issue of anti-open grazing to spare part dealers. You know, very careless comments. These are not signs of proper leadership. Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore transformed the country. My colleague just talked about Paul Kagame. And then even in areas where they don't even practice democracy, it shows you that leadership is the issue. In China, in the United Arab Emirates, see what they have transformed their country into. It shows you that the bane of Nigeria's development is leadership. And that was not displayed even on the floor of the House by the Deputy Speaker, who very undemocratically perpetrated a travesty on the Nigerian people, and Nigerians should be aware. And the NCC further buttressed that by coming to tell Nigerians falsehoods about their capacity or otherwise against their own reports that are in the public domain.
Well, Honorable, I know that these issues are going to, be on for a while, and we're not going to shy away from talking about them. We have to thank you for your contributions this morning. Honorable Mark Bila is representing Gwe East and Gwe West Federal Constituency in Benue State. Well, we'll quickly take some of your mails now that have come in, and we have this one from Frank talking about the Electoral Act amendment. Says there is no controversy as to whether Nigeria's electoral system needs to be fully digitalized because every Nigerian wants it, especially for election results to be transmitted electronically. But the needles controversy, which is driven largely by illusions and emotions than reality, is whether Nigeria currently has the needed IT facilities and wide data coverage to guarantee successful e-transmission of results. We should be careful in jumping into something that may cause more problems than the solutions we're seeking. Well, this one is from Frank.
Well, Success says leadership recruitment is a big problem in Nigeria. We celebrate mediocres instead of those willing to serve us in sincerity.
Take a look at the next one from Oshinowo Kingsley. Says, still on leadership recruitment, the fish gets rotten from the head. Getting to leadership position in Nigeria takes hypocrisy. The processes of attaining leadership in public sector have been made difficult and insulated against sane minds. Ethnicity, religion, and nepotism have replaced efficiency, accountability, and competence.
Well, James says, it is so sad in Nigeria that leaders can't be questioned or called to order. Sometimes these political leaders are seen as some sort of demigods or so. The youths have the power, and it is high time we questioned bad leadership and take this country forward.
And look at this. Abdusalam Yusuf says, the Not Too Young to Run initiative has been compromised. If an aspirant has to legally pay 1 billion naira to run for governorship, how on earth do they expect a young citizen to get 1 billion naira just to purchase forms? Well, I don't know that that's what they're saying in that particular section. I think it's a misinterpretation. But indeed, I think the idea is what is needed here. Look at the last paragraph. It says the electronic transmission of results saga is just one of those distractions. There are a lot of things that are not reasonable on the electoral amendment bill. I think it's very important that that bill, in terms of how it's been passed, well, we'll have to wait for the harmonized version for us to know really what has been passed now in both chambers of the National Assembly.
Yeah, or
Kenneth
Kenneth also...
was from
Okay. Kenneth also weighs in, says Nigeria is never in shortage of people who are well equipped to lead the country in the right direction. The obstacle has always been a kind of electoral system in the country, plus other unspoken strategies the political elites have always used to sideline new or upcoming players. When the right electoral law is put in place, people with the leadership know-how will appear on the stage.
You know, I'm so impressed, almost emotional, with the mails we're getting regarding the leadership recruitment process in Nigeria. I'm glad that this is something that we are all interested in. And Ngozi says, the laws you think are at your advantage today may haunt you or your person tomorrow. It is best to use the opportunity you have today to build a greater and better tomorrow where peace and justice will benefit you and all others.
Amazing advice there. Ben says, it is easy for the politicians to blame the masses. The truth is, how many of the Nigerian politicians are accessible? Even local government chairmen, how many of them live in the local governments they head? Unless we make politics less lucrative in this country, we will be wasting time because we will always have the worst of us ascend to the throne. Because of the high level of poverty and ignorance induced by these politicians, the people will always collect crumbs from them on election days. These politicians know this and wants the status quo to remain.
Well, I'll quickly run through this few short mails. Michael Paul says our leaders are very good at the use of divide and rule through religion and ethnicity. It will be difficult for the youths to come together against this set of political elites. Take the NSAS protest, for instance. And look at this one from Professor John Alizo, who talking about leadership challenges, says, why do we have age limit for professors and no age limit for politicians? Age discrimination in government should not be tolerated in Nigeria. This is a leadership problem. Well, I agree with you, Prof. And look at this from John Ugolo. The last one says, in order to recruit good leaders that will promote good governance and development in Nigeria, we need national vision, values, and ethos that will guide such recruitment. In Nigeria, we allow people to come into political leadership without any corporate vision. Nepotism, tribalism, religion, and materialism take center stage in our politics instead of vision and values. China, that is granting loans to Nigeria today, started to develop by defining national vision and values. Based on such vision and values, Chinese in diaspora return to China to assist in developing the country. Nigeria should start by calibrating progressive national vision, values, and ethos. That's from John Ugola. And he says, lastly, God bless Nigeria. I mean, it's certainly a prayer that I say amen to. Thank you so much for sending in your mails and comments this morning and for being a part of the show. I'm Malkwe Ogun Yusuf.
Well, I second that amen. I'm Kayode Okikulu.
I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful day.
Yeah, I love everyone to end with God bless Nigeria. Well, thank you all. We'll see you next time. I'm Chamberlain Uso.